What up, Wizards? It's Deb, SPMTG, we like it at Magic. And today we got more than Crimson Vow spoilers, a whole bunch more. They released like, I don't know, 700 cards this morning. So we have a lot to go through. And if you're interested in seeing any of the cards from Sunday, you can check out the VOD on Twitch. I will be moving it to YouTube soon if any of you want to watch it at 2x speed. I know some of you like to do that, although I can't imagine watching me on 2x speed. But if you can't wait for the video to drop on YouTube, or you just have to see it right now, then go over to the Twitch streams and check out the VOD for that content. We did it yesterday. But for now, I got to go through a million cards. So let's kind of any percent speed run the commons and uncommons. Go. All right, so let's start with Honored Heirloom first. This is a 3-mana artifact that you can tap for a mana of any color, or you can pay 2 and tap it to exile a card from a graveyard. Pretty interesting, but it would take a very specific format with some very specific problem cards for this to be better than any of the 3-mana rocks we currently have access to. There's also Distracting Geist. This is 3 mana, 2 and a white for a 2/1 spirit. Whenever it attacks, you tap target creature defending player controls, and you can disturb this for 4 and a white to get an aura that does the same thing. I tend to like these tapping creatures in Limited. I'm a big fan of most of these 3 mana. They tend to be 3 mana. Things that tap a thing down when they attack. So I do like the card, but it won't see any play outside of that format. Gotta say though, even in Limited, the toughness is pretty bad. But let's look at Lantern Bearer here. This is just 1 blue for a 1/1 spirit with flying. You can disturb it for 2 and a blue to get an aura. That's how these work in this set. Enchanted creature has +1/+1 and flying. So that's actually not as bad as it looks. Honestly, in Limited, you get a 1 mana 1/1, and usually you don't want to play 1-drops, at least not super significant 1-drops in Limited, but this 1-drop becomes an aura that makes your 5/5 a 6/6 flyer later in the game. So maybe it's actually worth the slot in your decks. But again, just to be clear, only in Limited. But next is Whispering Wizard. This is 4 mana, 3 and a blue for a 3/2 human wizard. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. Neat. This ability triggers only once each turn. Booty. This is a pretty bad card. This reminds me of, I hate that I can't remember his name. Mist is in his name somewhere. But anyway, it's a 4 mana thing from like Magic Origins that creates birds whenever you cast a non-creature. But it doesn't have like a once a turn limit, and this does, so it's like way worse. And that card was only marginally okay some of the time. But I like that card a lot, and I want to like this card, but once a turn is like, why? But anyway, it costs 4 mana. That's ridiculous. But anyway, Mischievous Geist is next. This is 1 and a blue for a 1/1 cat spirit. Nice. Whenever Mischievous Geist deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Nice. You can also disturb this for 2 and a blue to get Cat-like Curiosity, and just put Curiosity on a creature. Whenever it deals combat damage, draw a card. This is cool. This is cool. Honestly, a 2 mana 1/1, whenever it deals combat damage, draw a card, is actually not god-awful in the first place. It's really not bad. But your opponent will obviously block this with a thing that's going to kill it and survive combat like most of the time. So I doubt that this is actually standard playable in most cases. But in Limited, I could actually see running away with a game with this thing, just the aura half of it. So I do like the card. But up next is Sigarda's Imprisonment. This is 3 mana, 2 and a white for an aura that enchants a creature. Enchanted creature cannot attack or block. You pay 4 and a white to exile enchanted creature and create a blood token. So yet another in what is becoming a pretty long and illustrious line of pacifisms that become swords to plowshares. But I don't think this is anywhere near as good as like Candle Trap, the last one of these that we saw. But it's still like it's still playable in Limited, obviously. It's effectively removal. And I like the fact that it's an enchantment, right? Because that matters a little bit more in this Limited environment where you have some things that count enchantments. There's also Wedding Security. This is 5 mana, 3 and 2 black for a 4/4 vampire soldier, and whenever it attacks, you may sacrifice a blood token. If you do, put a +1/+1 counter on security and draw a card. So draw a card there is actually really slick. I don't mind this in Limited, where 5 mana 4/4 is okay. You know, it's not the best thing in the world, but it's fine. Mostly fine. And then it can become like a 5/5 and draw a card on the next attack step. That's not bad, but obviously this goes nowhere outside of that format. So let's look at Bloodsworn Squire here. Oh boy, this is 4 mana, 3 and a black for a 3/3 vampire soldier. You can pay 1 and a black and discard a card. To have Bloodsworn Squire get indestructible till end of turn, tap it. Then, if there are 4 or more creature cards in your graveyard, transform Squire. Now, Bloodsworn Knight has power and toughness each equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard. It's a Vampire Knight. You can pay 1 and a black and discard a card to have Knight gain indestructible until end of turn, and then you tap it. Now, first of all, this is obviously a fixed Seasoned Hallowblade, but it's fixed all right, as in it's neutered. It's fixed like a dog. I'm not really sure this is too great. Having to pay mana for the activation is real bad, but I guess at least you're fueling the graveyard you're helping it flip whenever you discard a card. But this does incentivize you to discard creatures. And I guess there's a lot of times you discard creatures to a Seasoned Hallowblade. There's plenty of times. But, in this case, it eventually gets a little bit bigger. It basically is at least a 4/4 by the time it flips, at least theoretically. So, I don't know. It's not so terrible, but it is definitely not Seasoned Hallowblade. And I would be a little surprised if this saw play. But then there's Retrieve. This is 3 mana, 2 and a green for a sorcery. Return up to 1 target creature card and up to 1 target non-creature permanent card from your graveyard to your hand and exile Retrieve. So this is 3 mana for 2 cards, and that's actually pretty good. That's actually not, I don't even know if this should be in this section, because that's okay. 3 mana for 2 cards is good, but obviously you have to fuel your graveyard with multiple different card types, but really only creature and one other thing. And if you get a creature and a land back, I actually think that's kind of good. So, creature in a creature land, or a creature in an evolving wild, or something like that. That's kind of fine. But when you get like a creature and a planeswalker for your 3 mana, that's very good. Like, that's so good. You get a creature in a Seeker's Chariot, or you get a creature in a Wrenn and 7. Like, yeah, that's probably okay. So it probably won't show up too much, but I wouldn't be surprised to see this as like a one of in a very specific kind of sort of mid-range deck. But in any case, up next is a Braid. A Braid? A Braid. It's back. This is 2 mana, 1 and a red for an instant. Choose one. It deals 3 damage to a creature or destroy target artifact, in case you have not been introduced to a Braid. This will kill Esika's Chariots, but also other stuff. So it's a good card. And obviously, if there are other problem artifacts, it'll bust those up. But last time we saw a Braid, it was in a format where artifacts really mattered. Like, a lot. Because Kaladesh had happened a couple of sets before that. And then we got a Braid in, like, Amonkhet. And so artifacts mattered a ton. And they just don't matter as much now. But there is one artifact that matters a great deal. And yeah, I guess you can bust up treasures with your Braid, but you probably won't. So up next is Syncopate. In case the Izzet decks needed another strong reprint to help them out in certain matchups. Syncopate is always a better card than people think it's going to be. When it got reprinted in the last format, we saw it go from like no testing in the early format to literally a 4 of in a bunch of decks by the end of things. It started getting played in sideboards, and it was 2 of, 3 of, 4 of. Syncopate is just always decent. It's really, really good on the play and a little bit worse on the draw, but we're in the kind of format right now where this is going to be great against like Auron's Epiphany decks. It's going to be great against people playing Blood on the Snow and Wrenn and 7 and like all these really expensive cards that people do like to play right now. Syncopate is just fantastic against all of those. This is a great card. I always love having access to Syncopate, as much as I yell about counterspells and how not fun they are sometimes. I still think that Syncopate is a cool card to have access to, and even though this does help out the blue-red decks, I guess you can think about it from this angle too. It also hurts the Izzet Epiphany decks. So it makes it much, much harder for them to cast those Epiphanies. And Syncopate is a sweet counterspell because it can go in just about any deck, even one that splashes blue, and that can't be set of every counterspell. So this has a little bit more utility throughout the entire game than a card like Negate, which can rot in your hand, Disdainful Stroke, which can rot in your hand, Test of Talents, which can rot in your hand. And even though those are all better against very specific targets, Syncopate is so much more versatile than any one of those cards is. So don't be surprised to see Syncopate pop up. But let's look at Scattered Thoughts next. This is 4 mana, 3 and a blue for an instant. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. Put 2 of those into your hand, the rest into your yard. This is cool. I really like that the other cards go into your graveyard, fueling specific synergies. This could be great in Solar Flare, right? Like the old Esper Reanimator deck that's kind of a control tempo deck that has these huge Reanimator plays in the late game. Could really, like a card like this, fuel graveyard strategies. It's almost like drawing 4 cards in the correct deck, right? You throw a flashback guy in there, a disturb guy, reanimation target, whatever. So this could be really good, even in a format with Behold the Multiverse and Memory Deluge and some other good 4 mana draw a couple of cards options. I mean, it's really hard to beat Memory Deluge. It's really difficult, but in just the right deck, this might get there. And honestly, even in Izzet, this might get there because Memory Deluge doesn't let you discard your Galvanic Iteration. Whereas this does. Not discard, but you know what I mean. If it's in the top 4, you get to put it in your graveyard. And that is actually pretty saucy, so I think the card has a chance. Well, let's check out Laid to Rest next. This is 4 mana, 3 and a green for an enchantment. Whenever a human you control dies, draw a card. Whenever a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it dies, gain 2 life. Now, I really want to like this, but I think it's priced out of playability in most formats, standard specifically. I do think if you have some free sack outlets, the turn that you play this, on turn 4. If you get this down on curve and you can sacrifice 2 or 3 guys for free, then that's probably good, especially if you have some sort of, other triggers for sacrificing those guys, some other benefit. It's probably fine, but it has to be humans. It costs 4 mana. It very often won't do much when it comes into play. But, in some games, this will help stave off an aggro tide, keep you in the game to where you can combo off and do whatever silly thing you're trying to do. And that's not terrible. There are plenty of +1/+1 counter / human synergies, some crossover between those two things. Not only in this set, but in standard at large, like Luminarch Aspirin, for instance. So I think the card could do some fun stuff, but I don't think that it's quite as good as it needs to be to really affect standard. However, I will say in Commander, if you're building like a tribal humans deck, then this is probably an auto include most of the time. Okay, we're actually getting pretty close to the end of the commons and uncommons and whatnot. And one of the last ones that I want to look at is one that I'm not super sure about, but I think might actually be really good. This is Radiant Grace. It's just a white mana for an aura. Enchanted creature gets +1/+0 and has vigilance. When the creature dies, return this to the battlefield. This enchantment to the battlefield transformed under your control, attached to target opponent. Now, you get Radiant Restrictions, which is a curse that enchants a player. Creatures enchanted player controls enter the battlefield tapped. That is actually really, really neat. In the early game, you're going to get a slight boost to a creature, plus like any aura synergy that you might have. This is just 1 mana for an aura, and in certain decks, that might really, really matter for double spelling, say Clarion Spirit. Or again, decks that care more about putting a large number of enchantments on the battlefield. This is just 1 mana, so it's good for that, if nothing else. But you get a slight boost to a creature. Vigilance is not nothing. It's always a better ability than we think it is. And then transforming it is when it really gets pretty decent. If it transforms too late, it's probably not very good, but if it transforms early enough, this is going to help you win sort of, those swingy, stalematey games, help you get that tempo in the first 3 to 5 turns of the game, and it's going to make sure that their Goldspan Dragons enter the battlefield tapped, that new 4 mana, 4/4 trample haste that's probably going to see some play in mono green, and Gruul if they want to get lower to the ground, and I think they do to beat the Alrund's Epiphany decks. This is going to make sure that comes into play tapped. Reckless Stormseeker comes into play tapped. There's a ton of creatures. Nighttime, Arlen comes into play tapped when she would otherwise be a 5/5 haste indestructible, right? You don't want that. So there's actually a fair number of hasty dudes in this format that I think this matters against. And it's not even like you have to disturb it. It just costs 1 mana for the entire package. And I actually think this is really sweet. But let's get into the rares and mythics from today, and it's actually kind of tough to know where to start because a lot of these are pretty good, but I guess I'll start with Lantern Flare, which I don't think is like a terrible card. I really don't. This is 1 and a white for an instant with Cleave, X, red, white. Lantern Flare deals X damage to target creature or planeswalker, and you gain X life. X is the number of creatures you control. So it's kind of a Kabira takedown with lifelink. If you don't pay Cleave. But if you do play the Cleave cost, then you just deal X damage to a creature or planeswalker, gain X life, and that's where the card gets pretty interesting. Kind of like an Erebos' Intervention in a way, is how it feels. But I'm still not too sure that the card is super playable in most cases. I really wish that it could hit a player. In that case, it would be very sick, but it can't. And so I'm just not too sure where the card's place in the format is. I'm not sure that it finds a spot in the Boros decks that it needs to, or that it's better than Kabira Takedown and Mono White. So I'm not too sure the card's going to do much in Standard, but I do think the card is really, really cool. That does count for something. The same thing is true of Stensia Uprising. This is 4 mana, 2 and 2 red for the dumb red enchantment of the set, but actually this could be better than I'm giving it credit for. This is an enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, create a 1/1 red human creature token. Then, if you control exactly 13 permanents, you may sacrifice Uprising. When you do, it deals 7 to any target, probably ending the game. And if you play this on 4 lands, that's 4 permanents, right? Plus this, plus the thing that it gives you at your end step, right? So that is 6 permanents just for playing this card, theoretically, right? So at that point, you only have to have 7 more. It's kind of like trying to get the city's blessing back in the day. I say back in the day, that was only a few years ago, but still, this is probably not great. It gives you a creature every turn, though, so at least you have something to block with. Like, it's literally not a do-nothing enchantment. It does a thing. The turn at ETBs. So at least you're getting something. And having a creature factory enchantment isn't bad, but you're just getting 1/1s. So, I don't know. I think I kind of like this, but I can't say it's going to see much play in Standard. That said, if you just have, like, some number of creatures and you keep playing lands, you play a 5th or 6th land, then you really only have to have, like, 5 creatures to make this work. and you'll get an extra one every turn. I mean, maybe this is better than I think, and maybe this is a way to sort of give vampires or some other mono red deck some late game reach to where it can actually finish, because that 7 damage to the dome should do it. It really, really should finish the game if it's like turn 8 in a mono red deck or a Boros deck. But I'm still not sure that this is going to be better than, say, Showdown of the Scalds and like Boros aggro. So I'm not sure that this is going places, but hey, at least it does something to turn to DTBs. It could be better than I think, but I highly doubt it. So let's check out Inspired Idea. This is 3 mana, 2 and a blue for a sorcery. Draw 3 cards. Your maximum hand size is reduced by 3 for the rest of the game, but you can pay the cleave cost, that's 3 and 2 blue, to just draw 3 cards. 5 mana sorcery speed, draw 3 is not good. However, 3 mana draw 3 is very good, especially at this mana cost, because you can sneak it into other decks, or you sneak it into like 3 color decks really easily. Or even 5 color decks if you want to draw 3. And honestly, reducing your maximum hand size by 3 might not be the worst thing in the world. It really might not, depending on your deck, especially if you already have very few cards in hand and you use this to, say, double spell. Or maybe you play this on your main phase and you still have enough mana to hold up a counter spell, like a negate or a Salt Coming or something. In which case, this actually really isn't so bad, especially in control decks nowadays that play a lot of bounce spells. You know, they don't play as many, 2-for-1s or even 1-for-1 removal as they used to. They play Fading Hopes and Divide by Zeros and stuff. And today's control decks do seem to run out of cards in their hand faster than normal. So this is a cool refill that doesn't necessarily screw anything up or overload your hand to where you have to discard every turn, depending on how many cards you have originally. Also, you can play like a Seagate Restoration and have no maximum hand size, so it doesn't matter that your hand size is reduced by 3. So there's some cool things to go with this card that I like a good bit. Or even like Triskaidekaphile, you have no maximum hand size. It goes really well with this. Matter of fact, turn 2 Triskaidekaphile into this is a way to start winning. So maybe, but I don't know. I kind of like the card in certain combo decks, that are looking for specific things and they can win on that turn if they find them. Like, there's some good things about a 3 mana draw 3, make no mistake. But let's look at Cultivator Colossus. There are a precious few mythics in this video, and this is one of them. This is 7 mana, 4 and 3 green for a Star Plant Beast with Trample. The power and toughness are each equal to the number of lands you control. When Cultivator Colossus enters the battlefield, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. If you do, draw a card and repeat this process. Yay! So, you already have to have 7 mana to play this, and then it wants you to have more lands in your hand for it to be good at all. You're paying 7 mana for a Renin 7 token with Trample. That's kind of a lot for something that's normally free. So it technically costs 5 mana, but the activation's free. I will say this kind of does work kind of sort of well with Renin 7, because Renin 7's +1 can put a bunch of lands in your hand. And you play this and you draw like 2 or 3 cards. And that's good. Very, very, very good. But I'm not sure how often that's actually going to happen. And for 7 mana, there's way better stuff. I would just rather play Coma for 7 mana than this, which has to wait a turn to attack. At least it can do something when it ETBs. And that thing is really good, but again, you have to pay 7 mana and it wants you to have even more lands in your hand. It doesn't look great to me. Maybe I'm missing something in Modern where you can, Light from the Loam, get a bunch of lands in your hand, then reanimate this guy and draw 6. There's probably something like that, but maybe I'm just rationalizing. I want to like the card more than I do. So let's look at Falconwrath Forebear. Double F is 3 mana, 2 and a black for a 3/1 flying vampire that can't block. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you create a blood token. You can pay a black and sacrifice 2 blood tokens to return Forebear from your graveyard to the battlefield. That is a good thing to be able to do with blood tokens. I've been mostly thinking that I'm going to be trying to get 5 blood tokens on the battlefield for that 2-drop, that 2/1 flyer. I really like that card, but this gives us another great reason to get blood tokens. It creates blood tokens on its own, although it's not always going to do that. A couple of turns after this comes down, Goldspan Dragon invalidates it. Elite Spellbinder runs into it, although I guess a positive way of saying that is it trades with Elite Spellbinders. So that's good. But it also trades with Eye Twitches, which is bad. So I want to like this more than I do too. And I typically don't like flyers that can't block. I think it's silly. But in any case, this one can't block because it can come back over and over. But it kind of depends on your blood token production, whether or not you're going to be able to bring this back more than once or twice in a game. But this is probably pretty good because a flying 3-power dude that comes back for ostensibly just 1 mana is probably worth playing in a lot of situations, given that you have the blood token production going. Now, this next card probably isn't good, per se, but it's an awesome-looking card. I want to play it forever. This is House of Haunted Dolls. This looks like a Gavin card to me. This is 5 for an artifact. You can pay 1 tap it, exile a creature card from your graveyard to create a copy of the exiled card. But it's a 0/0 artifact creature construct token in addition to its other types. With this creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. That creature gains haste till end of turn. Activate only whenever you could cast a sorcery. So the sorcery speed activation is a bit of a bummer. It would be really cool if it wasn't. I mean, it already costs 5. How much is it to ask for it to be instant speed? But anyway, this is going to at least create a 2/2 when it first activates, because you have this out, plus you'll have whatever you create as an artifact. So we'll at least make a 2/2. The next one makes a 3/3. The next one makes a 4/4. But obviously, the cool part of this is getting to repeat enter the battlefield triggers. 5 mana is so much up front for this, but I still want to try this out. And Nightmare Shepherd didn't work out. Hoffrey Ghostforge isn't working out. Lisa is very narrow in applications. So, we see cards like this every now and again, and they're just okay. They're just kind of fine. But this one looks funky enough for me to want to try it in some really janky stuff. So I'm excited about it, and I love the flavor. But next, let's check out Hamlet Vanguard. I'm not sure if this card is to be or not to be in Standard, but it looks pretty good. This is 3 mana, 2 and a green for a 1/1 human warrior with Ward 2. When it ETBs, you get 2 +1/+1 counters on it for each other non-token human you control. That's pretty good. I mean, the thing is, it's mostly a vanilla guy. It does have Ward 2, which is a real thing. Ward 2 ain't actually half bad, but it's kind of French vanilla. It doesn't really do much. It's just kind of a pile of stats with no real keyword abilities. Ward, I gotta say again, Ward isn't nothing, so keep that in mind. But this can just be a Lovestruck Beast. Turn 1 human, turn 2 human, turn 3 this, 5/5 magically. That's good. And later in the game, when you play it on turn 4, 5, 6 or whatever, it could be just enormous, absolutely huge. But I'm sure people out there are going to say, dude, if you already have 4 humans, you're winning the game. That's just not true. That's just absolutely not true in a lot of gameplay scenarios against mono green, mono white, where the board's getting big on both sides. You're both adding up, But I'd like a way to give this trample because it doesn't naturally have it. But I can see a world where this is a 7/7 fairly easily, relatively early in the game too. So I really like this card, and they're pushing humans a little bit in this set. I'm not sure if this is enough to make it work. Because again, it's just a French vanilla guy, but Lovestruck Beast was a 3 mana 5/5, and that did a lot in its format. So I'm looking forward to trying this. Up next is Curse of Hospitality. Really neat card. This is 3 mana, 2 and a red for a curse that enchants a player. Creatures attacking enchanted player have trample. Now, peep the wording on this. It's very specific. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to enchanted player, that player exiles the top card of their library. Until end of turn, that creature's controller may play that card, and they may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast that spell. So this is first of all, a 3 mana red enchantment that gives all your creatures trample, which is a thing. Just in and of itself, that's a thing that exists. But this is also just red card draw. This is just really good red card draw that kind of acts like a Florian. Although Florian hasn't been the best creature in the world so far. It might get a little bit better if Vampires is a real deck after this set, but Florian hasn't done much lately, and Florian might actually be the better card, but this is harder to get rid of than a Florian. It can trigger more times than a Florian in that it can draw you more cards in a turn, right? So I think this is actually kind of good. And in a lot of situations, it's not even a do nothing. It's a 3 mana draw a couple of cards, but you probably won't be able to cast them. Your mana's tied up and all that. So I'm not super duper sure. I do like that this can get you lands though. I had to check the wording on that. Is it play or cast? It is play, so you can get lands off the top of your opponent's library too. This is actually a fairly sweet card. But I'm just not sure where it fits or where it lines up is probably the better way to say it in this format right now. But it is a sweet card. But speaking of sweet cards, I guess, here's Allenbach Escart right here. This is just 1 white mana for a 1/1 human monk with vigilance. And you can sacrifice it. Target creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it gains lifelink and indestructible until end of turn. So this is not the dog. It's not Selfless Savior. I guess it's fixed. But we usually get creatures like this, nowadays at least. We get these white 1-drops that help save dudes. We saw All Seed of Life's Bounty and Theros. You know what I mean. These are relatively common nowadays. But this is much worse than we usually see, right? But it's still okay, especially in a Luminarch Aspirant format. And there's plenty of other ways to put +1/+1 counters on creatures. So this is probably very, very much playable. And we'll be good. I mean, honestly, a 1-mana 1/1 Vigilance isn't much to write home about in the first place. It's not the best thing in the world, but when you add this ability to it, it's probably good enough. You know, especially the lifelink aspect of it too. Like sometimes you're just going to sack this to give the creature lifelink to get yourself back in the game, catch up, whatever. So there's a lot of like cool flexibility to this card that like the dog didn't have. But this is in most cases going to be worse than the dog. But if you have a single +1/+1 counter on an important creature, it's suddenly in a lot of ways better than the dog. So good card. However, very annoying. I was always annoyed by the dog. I will be annoyed by this now. We got a very, very brief reprieve from dog effects, and Mono White was still one of the best decks in the format. So now look at him. That's a piece. But anyway, here's Patchwork Crawler, or Scavenging Oooze, I like to call it. This is just 1 and a blue for a 1/2 zombie whore. You can pay 2 and a blue to exile target creature card from your graveyard and put a +1/+1 counter on Crawler. Patchwork Crawler has all activated abilities of all creature cards exiled with it. That is really, really neat, especially if your Geralf dies. Geralf dies, you just exile it, and now you can start Geralfing again, so that's pretty cute. But there's a bunch of other stuff in this format, especially stuff that might go in the zombie deck, Ludwig and stuff. So just, I don't know. It could be really neat, but the worst thing about this card, if I had to pick something, is that it can only exile stuff from your graveyard, whereas Scooze could get it from any graveyard, and that really mattered in a bunch of games. This is just yours, and that's much worse. It's just so much worse, and it costs more mana to use the ability. 3 mana is a lot. 3 mana is a ton to activate this ability. But, you know, you can do it at instant speed, which is cool. You might be able to sneak in a play the opponent doesn't see by adding an activated ability and then immediately using it. So there's some fun stuff you can do with this, I'm sure, and there's probably interesting ways to blow people out. It does get bigger as the game goes on, but as a fixed Scooze, it's not good. You can't even look at it that way. It's a cool card, and I like cool cards. It doesn't cost too much to get on the battlefield in the first place, although it does cost a lot to feed. But the last couple of cards of the day, let's check out some wolves that may be relevant. Here's Cemetery Prowler. This is 3 mana, 1 and 2 green for a 3/4 wolf with 3 fur. Get it, 3 fur? I didn't even mean to do that pun. It's a 3/4 wolf with vigilance. And when it ETBs or attacks, exile a card from a graveyard. Spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each card type they share with cards exiled with Cemetery Prowler. That's neat. I mean, the only thing I'll say about this is that a 3 mana 3/4 in green, actually not super impressive. It's really not, but the cost reduction is boss on this, obviously. You can't play it in too many like 3-color decks unless you're super heavy green. So like the things that I really want to do with it, like, you know, play planeswalkers or like cool instants and sorceries for cheaper. Not necessarily off the table, but a little bit harder to do than I'd like them to be, just because of that cost. Mostly, you're hoping to exile a creature from your yard that has already died. And then your creatures cost less to play for the rest of the game. So this is solid. This is very solid. It's got a good creature type. It's got a decent stat line. 3 mana, 3/4, and vigilance again. Always better than you think it's going to be. So there's that. And obviously, if you untap with it and play, and you can start playing creatures or even like planeswalkers or instants for cheaper, then yeah, that's good. That's fine and dandy, like sour candy. But I actually, this is going to sound weird because I know a lot of people are praising this card today, but I actually want this to be slightly better than it is. I don't know. Maybe I'm spoiled on stat lines or whatever, but in a format where, you know, Old Growth Troll is a 3 mana 4/4. And this just runs into it and might not ever get a chance. You know, it gets Blizzard Brawled by an Old Growth Troll or something. The first turn it's in play and it never gets to do anything. You just exile a card from your yard for no reason. Maybe you need that later. Who knows? I do like that it has the 4 toughness, so it can't be like frostbitten or hit by a dry dragon's fire. Like, these are things I typically like. So I don't hate this stat line. I really don't. But I guess I'll say it again. I want to like this card better. What's wrong with me? You get it on attacks too. Like, you get to exile something when it attacks and then maybe get a different card type and cast that for cheaper. You attack with this, exile an instant, you get 1 mana Inscription of Ruin, or Inscription of Abundance rather. So like there's things. There are definitely things with this card, but that I can talk myself into. But maybe I don't know why I'm so apprehensive about it. I want it to be better. Maybe I'm spoiled on Old Growth Troll, but let's move on to a wolf that absolutely will see play. It's the thing we've all been waiting for, baby. It's Ascendant Packleader, y'all. They did it. They gave it to us. They gave us the 1-drop. It's just 1 green mana for a 2/1 wolf. It literally doesn't have to do anything else. This card does not have to have printed text to see play in Standard, but it does, and it's all upside. Ascendant Packleader enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it if you control a permanent with mana value 4 or greater. Whenever you cast a spell with mana value 4 or greater, put a +1/+1 counter on Ascendant Packleader. So, hold on. Just something I want to point out. It's permanent with 4 or greater. So if you have an Asika's Chariot, it doesn't have to be a creature, right? You have an Asika's Chariot or a Ren and 7, then this is a 3/2 when it ETBs, or when you play your Asika's Chariot, it becomes a 3/2 or a 4/3. Like it can get to that. Your 1-drop can become a 4/3 like somewhat easily, but then gets bigger as the game goes on, swings in against slower decks, the Izzet Epiphany decks and stuff. They might be able to take out your Werewolf Packleader with their Dragon's Fire, or their Frostbite, and then take out your Old Growth Troll with the Dragon's Fire with Goldspan Dragon back up. But the whole time they're taking damage from this guy, and they weren't doing that before. Mono Green needed, and Green Red Wolves needed a really good 1-drop. Just a Savannah Lions is all they really needed. They got that. Plus more. It's a Savannah Lions that can get twice as big as Savannah Lions. It's a very, very good Magic card. It's actually one of the better green 1-drops ever printed in terms of pure aggression. I mean, it's not like a Deathrite Shaman, obviously. But like in terms of pure aggression, it's one of, if not actually literally the best green 1-drop ever printed. And I know that somebody probably would take issue with that, but green doesn't get a whole lot of Savannah Lions, and when it does, they often have downsides. This has nothing but upside, gets bigger as the game goes on, decent top deck depending on the board states. So this is everything Mono Green and Gruul Werewolves ever wanted, and they finally got it. But that's all I got for today. There is one card I didn't cover. It's kind of like a Elvish Piper for wolves, but I can't find a decent translation of that card online yet. So as soon as I get a decent translation, I'll include it in that video. But just let me know how you felt about this one today. Wolves got that 1-drop, baby. That could have been the only spoiler today, and it would have been super hype. But Wolves got that 1-drop. Mono Green got that 1-drop. So sick. But there's a bunch of other really sweet cards today. Just let me know what your favorite stuff from Monday was down there in the comments section. Like, subscribe if you haven't done it yet, because there's more spoilers to come. Then Deck Techs Top 10 Sleepers video. We're going to be rating the entire set, card by every card in the set. We're going to be assigning a number grade 2 on Twitch. There's a bunch of, and that's going to end up on YouTube. There's a bunch of content you want to see, so make sure you're subbed, hit the bell for the notifications. Aside from that, check out Twitch. Again, if you want to see the VOD of all the cards from Sunday, and there's some interesting cards from Sunday, to say the least, check that out over on twitch.tv if you can't wait for me to upload the VOD to YouTube. And if you want, you can check me out on Patreon. $1 a month to vote on what decks we're going to do all during Crimson Vow Standard Season. Just $1 a month. That's all I cost. I'm worth more. I think $1 a month is all I care to ask you for. So if you got it in your pocket, go over there and help me out. Really supports the channel. Aside from that, follow me on Twitter if you like the occasional take. But aside from that, I'm done for this one. Got to get to editing. A lot of stuff to translate, and I want the video to come out before midnight. So I got to go ahead and get to it. Love you guys. Get at me in the comments section. I am Dev from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.